Fox News' Tucker Carlson is reportedly furious at executives at his own network for not supporting claims that the National Security Agency spied on him in a plot to destroy his show. Carlson himself denies the reporting, calling it, quote, absurd, saying in a text to a CNN reporter, quote, "I'm not mad at anyone at Fox. If I was, I'd say so. I'm mad at you for lying relentlessly. What a loathsome person you are. Please print that."
Amazing. Joining us now to discuss is Democratic strategist and owner of JC Strategies, Jennifer Holdsworth-Karp, and author and senior director of policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard. Welcome, both of you.
Good morning. Good morning.
So, Rachel, I'm going to start with you, and let's set aside this report, that sort of palace intrigue over whether Tucker is angry at Fox News executives. And let's just, with all of the updates that we have in front of us, how likely do we think it is at this point that Tucker's original allegation is proving to be accurate?
There's obviously no real way to know, but I think if you look back on previous precedent about the spy state's abuses of its surveillance authority, particularly around journalists, as well as, sitting members of Congress, I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibilities. And we know this as well from the NSA's own statement, where they said, well, he's never been a target. Well, anyone who's been paying attention to any of this, right, from the Snowden revelations in the PRISM program to the NSA breaking into Senate staff computers to James Clapper lying to Congress, we know that they collect troves and troves of data on Americans that they then have access to through unmasking capabilities. You don't have to be a target, in other words, for the NSA to have your data. And we know that they abuse this surveillance authority. We have many, many documented cases of this. So is it entirely within the realm of possibility that Tucker Carlson is being spied on? Yes, it's entirely within the realm of possibility that, sitting members of Congress are being spied on as well. This is just how our surveillance state works. It's entirely in need of transparency and reform.
And one friendly amendment to what Rachel said, it was the CIA that spied on the Senate staffers.
Oh, right, correct.
Which doesn't make it better, doesn't make it worse.
Yes, you are right.
Same infrastructure. The intelligence community often talks about things not in black and white, but with levels of confidence. And I think we can say with very high confidence that the NSA did intercept some of Tucker Carlson's communications based on what has been said and based on what the NSA itself has said. Jennifer, what I'm curious about, why do you think the left was so quick to say, and some of Tucker's enemies on the right were so quick to say that this couldn't possibly have happened?
Well, I think it's because they're looking for, our favorite word in law school was a scintilla of evidence. Right now, it is just an allegation. Now, what Rachel and what you refer to is entirely true. The NSA has a long history of abusing their power and abusing the abilities that were given to them to protect the United States from foreign adversaries. There needs to be an additional degree of transparency in how they're operating. However, at the moment, there doesn't seem to be any evidence that they targeted Tucker Carlson. Now, I think, just as Rachel did, you have to look at the statement and say they very specifically use the word targeted. It doesn't mean that they didn't come up with other evidence through another avenue, right? So there's a lot of questions to be answered. On the other hand, you can't prove a negative, right? So if it didn't happen other than releasing a statement, then there's nothing that you can do about it. I think one of the other reasons the left came to the NSA's defense was because Tucker Carlson has a long history of pushing fantastical conspiracy theories on his network. And I think it says, I know we wanted to ignore a little bit of the palace intrigue in this discussion, but I think it says a lot that the Fox network is not backing him up on this particular claim. The only evidence he had is that there were other members of the press who reported on it. That's not unusual. It's not unusual for members of Fox to leak some of the things that their anchors and reporters and journalists are doing. So it is a very small ecosphere in Washington. It's an even smaller ecosphere when you're talking about the journalism and reporting world. So I think that there are a multitude of ways that this could have escaped the Fox network other than just the NSA. That is a huge leap.
And it's not so much that Fox isn't backing him up so much as it's they haven't covered it on the news side. So it has been covered by some opinion people, but it hasn't been covered and amplified on the news side. So Rachel, my question then to you, if we start this way, as Jennifer mentioned, the NSA's denial was sort of laughable. But I want to ask, Tucker says that an unmasking, by the way, the process of unmasking journalists and leaking their names to the media is illegal. How does Tucker's NSA whistleblower come to him and tip him off on this without, and Ryan and I were talking last week, that basically what seems to have happened is that Tucker was caught up in the dragnet. He may not have been deliberately targeted, but in the dragnet of getting...
He was communicating with people close to Putin to set up an interview.
US-based Russian...
all of that up. Right.
So it makes sense he would be caught up in the dragnet. But so is Tucker's NSA whistleblower, if Tucker isn't unmasked and not just identified internally at the NSA as an American journalist, as opposed to Tucker Carlson, how does that information end up getting to Tucker?
It's a good question, and I'm not entirely sure, right? I think Tucker Carlson is, who he is. He's a force of personality, and I think willing to sort of look into claims, that might not make it, to all the way to other journalists. But I think, this idea that other outlets at Fox aren't reporting on this isn't quite an indication to me, or isn't quite an indication that they're not taking it seriously in my mind. And the reason is because a lot of these networks have for a long time been dealing with, the interface between their reporting and law enforcement and the spy state. I mean, you go back all the way to the Bush administration, where, the Bush administration was spying on journalists, all the way through the Obama administration to now recently we've had revelations that the Trump DOJ also seized, email logs of a CNN reporter, but you haven't seen CNN, hyperventilating all over the place about that because, their lawyers are kind of used to dealing with this to some extent. I mean, in 2013, the Obama administration put a Fox journalist down as a criminal co-conspirator in a search warrant. They were going to put him in jail. Now, they say they weren't going to put him in jail, but they still listed him as such. And we've seen this again. This is a bipartisan exercise. So I do think that the lawyers within these networks take this very seriously. And it may be a case where they are working on it, where it doesn't get a lot of sort of feature coverage, but that doesn't mean it's not being paid attention to. Again, I'm entirely speculating just based on, history here, but that's my take.
Right. So Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky is calling on the director of the NSA to run an investigation into the allegations, saying that Carlson is, quote, to be afforded the freedom of the press protections guaranteed by the First Amendment. Jennifer, I want to try to pin you down on the scintilla of evidence claim, because I would say that there is at least a scintilla in this sense that we now know. Now, we didn't know it the first night Tucker came out, but we do now know that he was in communication with U.S.-based, Russian operatives who were, close to Putin, who are, as a matter of course, under surveillance by the NSA. And so, if he's in communication just incidentally, and they call that incidental, just incidentally, they're going to pick that up. And then when you combine that with the NSA statement that they did not target Tucker, which is not denying that they didn't incidentally pick up some of his communication. Doesn't that seem like we can be pretty confident that that's what happened?
Yes, but I think that the term spy being used as a verb has a very specific definition. And it is and I don't want to be seen as defending the NSA here. I've had my problems back since before the Patriot Act. But I think that we need to be careful with the words that we're using. And that is what the conspiracy theory that Tucker Carlson is trying to spin up. He is not making
But how
the
is it a
distinction.
conspiracy theory?
Because he is saying I was spied on, meaning that he was targeted and his communications were targeted. That does not seem to be the truth here. What seems to be the truth, if it did happen, is that he was caught up in the dragnet. And nothing was ever pursued on it. Well, the question is, was he unmasked? Was the NSA whistleblower the one who actually did the unmasking? Nobody had heard about this until Tucker brought it up himself. So again, I mean, look, I don't want to be in a position to say like the NSA did nothing wrong. I think that if they targeted him, they absolutely did do something wrong. If they kept his communications for a later date to use it against him, they absolutely did something wrong. If they forwarded it to Congress because they thought that he should be a part of an investigation, then they most likely did something wrong. I think the issue that the left is taking here, and I actually don't share this, but I'm sharing this opinion. I actually think that what they're saying is do not conflate the two. Do not conflate, you actually being caught on tape because you were speaking to a Russian operative with the NSA targeting you because you were having these conversations. Those are two entirely different situations. And to purposely try to conflate one with the other, that's the conspiracy theory.
Right. And Tucker also said that there was a conspiracy to kick his show off there, to use this against him, for which the evidence is that that's what the whistleblower told him. So I think it's fair to say that that hasn't been confirmed at this point. But Rachel, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So next on Rising, we discuss new stimulus checks and universal child care when Rising returns.